8, so let's get started. Thanks a lot, everyone, for coming along this morning. It's just a very early morning session, probably not as bad as having a Friday session in the first at 8 o'clock. But my name is Vishesh. I work as a technical evangelist in Microsoft New Zealand. So I just across the ditch in Auckland and focusing on sort of building, a bunch of solutions using build ISVs and partners and startups and stuff. So it's just around all sorts of emerging technologies. So, for example, IoT, we did a really nice project with one of the customers in Auckland in November, and some of those learnings, I've sort of captured them and thought actually I'll come up and sort of tie a presentation around it so that a lot of you in the room might be able to just get quickly started and get a nice developer's, overview of how things work and hopefully implement them when you get back to your homes this weekend as well. So yeah, a bit about myself, 23 years old, based out of Auckland, do a whole bunch of stuff with all sorts of audiences, right from 6 years old to just 60 years old in some ways, I would say. So today's session will be around giving, as I said, a bit of a developer's guide to how to connect different bits and pieces in Azure. And just to sort of set a bit of context, how many of you have used Azure IoT services before in this room? Right, probably a handful. Okay, sort of. And I'm guessing some of you might already be familiar with things like Power BI and Logic Apps and stuff and heard them, seen them all throughout the week. How many of you attended Fi's session yesterday? All right, a handful as well, which is good. So the first sort of 10 minutes might be a bit of an overlap, but after that we'll sort of get into a bit more, the further steps from there. Cool, so let's get started. So what I've done is I've just made a markdown file on GitHub. It's got all the resources and stuff. So in case you might want to replicate this stuff that I'm building today, I've uploaded my code snippets. I've uploaded a bunch of links as well that you can have a look at. And I've added them in a sequential way so that whatever stuff I'm talking about now will be relevant when you go through those links one after the other. There are lots of them, but it's just MSAU Ignite, which is our official hashtag, --IoT. So you can have a look at that easily after that. Cool, so let's probably kick start. And I think if we take a step back a little bit and look at what the changing perspectives that we've been on, we started off a few centuries ago where we were just looking to, complete our basic necessities, right? Finding food and doing a whole bunch of stuff there. And then you fast forward a couple of centuries further, you had someone like Bill Gates asking to have, or aspiring to have a desktop on every single desk in every single home. But if you fast forward down to today, right, you're looking to have a computer in every chicken and every pot, as well as having a desk or having a phone in every pocket. So, which is a very interesting, changing perspective as we look today what's happening around the world. And similarly, it's sort of this next wave of computing as well, as people like to call it, right? After IoT, you've also got things like holographic computing and stuff that's slowly cropping up. But in some ways, we could say that IoT is sort of already here, and we can start tapping onto the stuff that's being built by a whole lot of vendors and so on. And again, it's not a new concept though. Ourselves, we've had Microsoft Windows Embedded for a really long time. That's been powering a bunch of ATM machines and automobiles and computers and whatnot. So IoT's been there since a long time. It's just that you've got a bit more diversity in the types of devices that you can tap onto, and a lot of that comes because of the inflection point of having cheaper hardware, having a much more ubiquitous network availability, and a cheaper way of storing information as well, because the most amount of cost these devices will have is basically the data and the telemetry that they'll be sending out. And all of that stuff is getting cheaper, a lot more easier to access, and hence why we're sort of being able to capture that information quite easily. And if you look at sort of the overall, overarching IoT picture, I like to sort of depict that in sort of these little sections or parts of the puzzle, as I like to call it sometimes. Is that where you start off with, your data sources, which effectively is, for example, your data coming from a bunch of apps or data coming from, websites or customers or customer insight or whatever it is. And then you've got a bunch of devices and sensors as well that are sending you telemetry on and off about all the stuff that's happening with the device itself. And then if you look at it, right, it's quite easy to take it forward and then think about how do you actually turn that data into some form of consumable intelligence that you can then act upon. And to facilitate that, you start off by sort of ingesting the data and managing your data sources, because a lot of the times the conversation seems to be around ingesting information, but it's also about understanding how do you manage your devices or manage your data sources from, across the different device sets that there are. And there are a couple of services in there that I'll talk about in just a minute, but I just thought I'll give you a bit of an overview on how this sort of whole picture fits into the play. So once you're able to manage the devices that you're connected with, you're ingesting data, then that's the time you think about maybe how do you store that information, right? Store that data. And if you store that data, you've got a whole bunch of options, traditional SQL stuff or no SQL stuff as well. That's been quite popular in that space. And then you think about how can you apply some analysis on top of it. And as you can see, like for example over there, we've got the Stream Analytics service, which is kind of this hot path of analysis that happens in near real time that you can then quickly analyze, capture anomalies, capture alerts, and then take a step back from it and action upon those items that are generated from that data and information. And of course, there are some things around intelligence that we recently announced, maybe adding a bot to it to make it a lot more easy interface to connect to it. But at the same time, use something like Power BI to actually visualize that information and be able to get that sort of, holistic view of what's really happening with your millions of devices sitting in the field. And of course, then you can sort of hook into something like a logic app that can then help you with the business processes. And that's when you sort of complete this whole cycle of, going from just capturing data and stuff from your IoT devices, converting them into something that's actionable at the end of the day. So that's sort of the overarching picture. And I thought what would be good is to kick off with a bit of a pre-configured solution that might just set the scene a little bit and give you a chance to see that actually a lot of these scenarios are already being built by someone, or there are a whole bunch of things that you can actually start using today itself. You don't have to start from scratch to begin with. So one of them is called Remote Monitoring Solution. And this solution is designed to allow you to be able to sort of monitor thousands of devices and then be able to simulate some of that functionality, but at the same time be able to capture that information and convert that into some actionable insights in real time. So what I've done is I've got a solution here which has basically got that whole picture that I was talking about just a few slides ago, where you start off with the devices. Maybe in this case they are simulated, and I've also got a Raspberry Pi connected that I'll show you how to connect that as well in just a minute. And then you've got this core solution which encompasses around managing devices and ingesting data, which is the IoT Hub part over there. And then there is this hot path of stream analysis where you are analyzing stuff in real time, pushing it into some work or some jobs that are out there, web jobs being replaced by functions functions being a better way of using these tasks. And lastly, you've got logic apps, which sort of becomes your back-end business processes driver in this case. And maybe in this case, we preferred using DocumentDB, and we're using Power BI to visualize some stuff on the web app over here. So that's sort of the overarching picture, and you'll see this theme across most of the scenarios. So as I said earlier, it's about figuring out what your devices are, what's the portfolio there, how easy it is to connect with them, what's the operating system, and so on. What protocols that they can talk to as well, because a lot of the times they can't even talk TCP, right? So you got to understand how can you apply a gateway in there on the field itself that can communicate, take all that information in UDP and maybe communicate over TCP so that that device can connect to the Azure IoT Hub, for example. So let's quickly have a look at the sample and see what it is inside it. So if I switch over to my screen, there we go. So it's quite straightforward. If you, all right, as it is. Whoops. Here we go. So AzureIoTSuite.com is the website. I've included the link in the GitHub page as well, so you don't need to note it down right now. And once I've got that stuff there, I can easily go ahead and create a pre-configured solution. At the moment, we offer both predictive maintenance and remote monitoring solutions as part of it. But I preferred using remote monitoring because it's a lot more sort of relatable in some ways, and a lot more easy to get started with. So I'll just click on Get Started. I created one just last night, and I've got one up and running that I can sort of play with. And what you'll see straight off the bat is that it's got a nice little dashboard. And again, this whole solution is open source as well, so I've included a link to the whole GitHub repo as well. Now, what I like about this scenario or this solution is that I can capture the solution and customize it to my needs, because a lot of the times they've done the basic grunty work of connecting devices, creating logic, creating alerts and alarms and so on, and I can customize it based upon whatever my scenario is. And what I've got in here is basically all these tiles that you see here are something that we call Power BI embedded. So it's designed for you to be able to build apps and stuff and then stick them on a web dashboard like this one over here. And I'll talk about that in just probably towards the later half of the presentation as well, but that's the sort of beginner part there. And then if we look at devices, for example, I've got a bunch of devices already connected here. So if you can see, I've got these 4 sample simulated devices that are already part of the solution, and I've got them running. And then I've also got my Raspberry Pi connected as a device. And then I've got my, the model number is incorrect, but I've got my laptop connected as well, because it's just a Windows 10 universal lab that I can deploy to Raspberry Pi or to my machine itself. And then from there on, you'll see that I've included a couple of rules as well. And this whole rules thing is being governed by that web jobs part that was there in the solution diagram before, where I can actually configure a whole bunch of rules around, if the humidity is more than 48 degrees, you want to do something about it and send an alert to someone. And it's got a rule ID as well attached to it, so you can sort of manage that stuff from there. And then, for example, if you've got more than one devices with a humidity alarm, you then have an action saying raise the alarm or send a message if it's a temperature alarm. So it's quite easy to configure and go through it. What I'll do is I'll quickly show you what one of the simulated devices look like. So if I come back to the home screen, I can just go back to one of the sample devices, and as you can see, it's showing me telemetry that's coming from these simulated devices, which happen to have the location to be around somewhere in Seattle. So you've got all that information there. You've also got the maps functionality as well. But what I'll do in this case is I'll go to Visual Studio, and I'll grab the solution that's available for me to sort of just run a quick sample around it. And then if I want, I can quickly add a device from here. But since I've already added my Raspberry Pi to it, what I'll do is I'll go back to Visual Studio, and under Settings, you'll notice that I will be deploying to an ARM processor, which is remotely hosted. So I've got my physical Raspberry Pi over here connected to projector number 6, but I've got this IP address as well attached to it, so I know what the IP address looks like. If you want to see what the Raspberry Pi looks like, I'll quickly switch over to that. So this Raspberry Pi is running a Windows 10 IoT Core Windows Insider preview on it. Quite easy to do. You can actually, if you buy a Raspberry Pi off the shelf, and I've got a couple of them to give away as well, you get Noobs, I think, pre-installed in some of the SD cards. And if you're using the Noobs bootloader, we've got Windows 10 as part of it itself. So you don't have to connect your SD card to your computer, re-image it, and all of that stuff. So it's quite easy to just get started with Windows 10 IoT Core running on Windows 10. Running on Raspberry Pi. So that's what it looks like. I've got the IP address from there. I'll quickly switch back to my machine. There we go. And once I've done that, I'll just go ahead and deploy it to my remote machine. And I'm not gaming this. This is all happening in real time. So hopefully. So there you go. It started the process. Let's switch over and see what's happening on the Raspberry Pi side. There we go. Looks like it's deployed the app. It's kicked off. And as you can see, you can have this Raspberry Pi both as a headed device or a unheaded device as well. So by that, you can have a display, or you can get rid of the display altogether if you want. So what I'll do next is basically it was supposed to have some fields in it, but apparently it doesn't. So the problem is I'll spend my whole life just typing this in over here, because these secret keys are pretty long. So what I'll do is I'll just have to probably skip this part. It had all the fields just before. All right. So instead of typing all those connection strings, what I'll do is I'll quickly run that app on my machine. So I've got the same Windows 10 universal app running on my machine as well. And those are the secret keys and stuff. If I started typing them up, I'll just spend probably the rest of the session doing that. But what I'll do in this case, I'll just simply click on, let's connect to the IoT suite. Once I've done that, the next step is to, start sending some telemetry to it as well. So it's just as simple as that. They've got a universal app, and the best part is universal app runs on all sorts of Windows 10 devices. So I've got my Raspberry Pi running Windows 10. I've got my laptop running Windows 10 as well. So if you don't have a Raspberry Pi at home, you can actually get started with all these services quite quickly and easily using Windows 10 machines. So let's head back. And previously, if you remember, one of my devices, this primary one, didn't have any telemetry coming into it. But now, as you can see, that all telemetry is actually coming through in real time, and I can easily capture that. So let me try and change some of these values, increase the humidity, and decrease the temperature. And you'll see in just a matter of a couple seconds, it'll then start updating what I've just updated in my app as well. Hopefully it shows up. Let's give it a couple more seconds. There we go. So you can see the sort of changes started to happen. You've got temperature coming down a little bit, and you've got the humidity sort of going up as well. So what we'll do is, so this was sort of one of the sample scenarios. What we'll do now is build something similar from the ground up, and then look at how all these things connect together. So let me just quickly switch back to my slides. Perfect. So when I get back to my slides, you'll notice that there is the solution that we talked about, and I had all of these different components in it. So what we'll do now is going step by step, thinking about managing devices, ingesting information, doing hot analysis, and then displaying stuff on a dashboard. We'll try and implement that in just a minute. So this is part of the wider sort of Azure IoT suite of services that we like to sort of call it. But it's just a bunch of services in Azure that apply to sort of non-IoT scenarios as well. So you think about doing hot analysis about some stream of, Twitter information, or an analysis from your customers or feedback forms and whatnot. So you can grab that information and do, quick analysis in the real time using a lot of these services that are provisioned for you to access. So let's start off with Azure IoT Hub itself. How many of you have connected to Azure IoT Hub before in this room? All right, okay, handful, that's pretty good. So Azure IoT Hub is sort of this service in Azure that allows you to connect millions of devices, but apart from that, it also allows you to have a bi-directional communication between yourself and the device. Now, what is interesting in that is a lot of times we talk about collecting telemetry from these devices, but with IoT Hub, you can actually send actionable actions back to the device as well. So you can have a sort of device to cloud and cloud to device communication stream throughout the process. At the same time, you can manage the device identity as well, which is pretty critical, because if you think about provisioning, say, about 1 million devices, you don't want to be physically, updating them and adding them to the field yourself, because the cost of provisioning them physically would probably be higher than the cost of the actual device and the information that you're gathering from it. And similarly, you've got a whole bunch of other features as well. So if you went to Fire Session, you would have heard about them. If you haven't, I'll recommend you to have a look at that after this conference as well. But to give you a very high-level picture, right, you've got this sort of IoT hub in between that connects the devices over to the services in cloud itself. So we've got this concept of a gateway as well. So IoT Hub comes with a gateway SDK that you can implement yourself. So as I talked about the scenario where you might have, legacy devices that talk in C or, some other ancient language, you can actually use the IoT Hub gateway SDK to actually implement your own gateway, implement your own protocols, and then communicate with IoT Hub that's sitting in the cloud, by which you can have, both device to cloud to device communication, manage device identities, and then you can also have sort of this, message feedback and monitoring endpoint that helps you understand what the state of the device is. So we've got this concept of creating a device twin, which effectively allows you to give the device ask the device to have a desired state, and you have the actual state saved into it as well. So you can actually check what the two states are, and whenever the device becomes online, based upon the desired state, the device gets updated as well. So without talking too much more, let's quickly head over to the next demo. And it'll be a series of demos that we'll build in the next few minutes. There we go. So where we'll start is, we'll start off with Azure. And by the way, I'm not sure if you guys know about this feature, but this is one of my favorite ones, is that if you double click on anywhere on the dashboard, you can actually change colors of the screen. I like it a lot, and I can spend the whole presentation doing that. Anyway, moving on. So if you go and open up IoT, there's a section specifically provisioned for IoT. You'll get all those IoT services that I had in a few slides, in a couple of my slides in just a few seconds ago. So if I start off with the IoT Hub, I can go ahead and just as any other Azure service, I just give it a name, select the pricing tier. It also comes with a free tier as well, so you can have a little play with it. And I can select the location and just click on create. Just for the best interest of time, I thought I'll quickly go back to the portal, and let's start off with the, this IoT Hub that I've already provisioned. I haven't customized this at all, so this will be kind of doing it for the first time now. And what I'll do now is, I've got this created. I'll go back to Visual Studio, and then create a new project. Now, one of the things that we've done with this is, since I want to keep it simple, I'll just start off with a blank universal app, universal Windows app. I'll call it live demo app. Hope it works. And then there we go. Cool. So I can select the Windows version as well. In this case, I'll just go with standard stuff to make things easier. Hopefully, it'll probably take a couple more seconds. Perfect. So there you go. That's sort of the standard universal app. Now what I'll do is, you'll notice this section for references over here. Now under references, what we've done is we've added this option for you to add a connected service. So let's click on that and see what options we have over there. Now as you can notice that there are a few options in there, and one of them is called Azure IoT Hub. So as a developer, when I'm building apps for Azure IoT suite of services, or Azure IoT Hub in this case, I can literally just click on this, and then I can choose from a couple of options. So one thing that we are doing is, so if you are in this sort of IoT space and you've worked with a whole bunch of devices, you'll know about this thing called TPM, which allows you to kind of provision devices through a certificate-based authentication mechanism. So we are soon going to enable that. It's on the roadmap for Windows 10, I believe, Windows 10 IoT. But for now, we'll just go with the hard-coded option so that we can quickly provision this. And if I zoom out a bit, wow, don't do that. There we go. So I've got 3 of them. I'll just use the recent one that I created. I'll just click on Add. And what this will do is this will add a whole bunch of binaries and NuGet packages and stuff, the standard stuff that it needs usually. And it also asks me to create a new device. So let me just go ahead and create a new device. I'll call it my demo Win10 device. Click OK. And that's all I need for now. All right. That doesn't look very good. Let's try it once again. OK. So just threw up an error on me. Go. Sorted. I think it's the right one. It is the right one. Let's go add. And it's starting to add connected devices, loading devices. Click OK. There we go. So it looks to be working now. And as you can see, it's just adding a whole bunch of NuGet packages in the background and my references. And it just creates an easy interface for me to connect to without having to do the basic, plumbing work around connecting IoT Hub to my app and so on. And what I've also got is this thing called the Device Monitor, Device Explorer app, for example. So for that, what I'll do is I'll go back to my Azure IoT Hub, and over there I'll just go there, and then I'll go back and click on Shared Access Policies. And if I just want to create, hang on a second. There we go. I'll just click on that, and hopefully it'll give me a connection string. Well, I'll just copy that, And I'll quickly paste that in here. Cool, awesome. So that was all set up. And then, as you can see, what I did was, previously when Visual Studio was spinning up this demo for me, or spinning up, connecting the IoT Hub SDK or this connected service for me, I went ahead and opened up this Device Explorer app that allows you to explore IoT Hub, the stuff that's happening in IoT Hub essentially. So you can check, you can monitor devices, you can monitor traffic, and you can send back commands as well. So in this case, if you remember, I created a Windows 10 device from within Visual Studio. It's automatically seen that I've got a device here. And if I go to Azure as well, it will hopefully know that I've got that device created. So if I click on the Devices tab on top, I'll just zoom in. So now Azure also has a demo Windows 10 entry as one of the devices as well. So it's all working synchronously and quite easy to configure. Now let's go back to Visual Studio and basically try and communicate with the Azure IoT Hub. So what I'll do is I'll open up the main page.xaml and quickly add a couple of UI elements and then add some code behind the scenes as well. Just give it a few seconds to load up. Perfect. So nothing fancy, nothing's in the code yet. It's just a stock standard app which has got the Azure IoT Hub connection already established. So it's got the connection string over here. And then it's also got this method for sending device to cloud messages, and it's got the method for receiving cloud to device messages as well. So it's super easy to work with. Perfect. Let me just minimize that. And if we go back there, hopefully my UI is up and running. There we go. I'll just increase the size a little bit so that it's easier to work with. And then what I'll do is I'll just go to the toolbox and I will add a button. Don't judge my UI skills here, please. But let me just, whoops. Don't rotate. There we go. And I've just got a click event available here. So what I'll do now is I'll just keep it easy to work with, and I'll just start typing in a run command, which is working asynchronously. That will then hopefully, hang on, I think I'm missing something. And then I can just create, just go await. I think it is Azure IoT Hub. There we go. Dot send device to cloud message async. And my semicolon goes there. And let me just resolve this guy. There we go. So it's using tasks. All right. There we go. Does it work? Oh, sorry. Yep. Thank you. There we go. So that's the basic statement to basically connect it up and start sending messages. Now, if you see within my Azure IoT Hub, it's not really sending any fancy messages. It's just saying hello from UWP C#. But what we can do is we can simulate a small functionality to randomize the traffic a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly go back, and I'll make it easier for all of you as well. I'll just go back and create. There we go. So I've just got a random object that just grabs and creates a temperature object for me, which basically adds the date and time and creates some random telemetry for me to send off to Azure IoT Hub. Now for that, what I'll also do is maybe just create a new model. And since I am a bit of a freak, I'll start off with a folder called model, following all the best practices, and then add a new class. There we go. And I'll just call it temperature object. There we go. So once I go there, I can quickly go ahead, and then maybe I think this was a, let's keep it as a double, and then I can maybe, I think it was called, whoops, what did I call it over here? There we go. So it's called temp over here, and it's called date and time. There we go, temp. And then one more property, which will be date, time. And I'll call this, I think it was just date, time as well. So let's save that quickly. Go back to my IoT Hub. probably try and resolve this. Yep, there we go. And I'll also add the JSON package as well. There we go. So now what it's doing is basically added some code which is just creating some random telemetry and then sending it off to Azure for me to then consume. And that happens whenever I click on the button. So let's open up this device explorer here and click on the messages that are sort of coming through from the device. And I'll just click on start monitoring the events that are coming from the device so that I can see that the IoT Hub is actually receiving those events or not. So once I get that, I've got this decent UI in place. And once I've done that, it's super easy. Just click on the button and hopefully it starts sending some information or some telemetry. There we go. Awesome. So as you can see, it's just that JSON object that's coming through. It's got temperature and it's got a date time value. And whenever I click the button, it then goes ahead and updates that. And I think initially it just took a few seconds to load that whole communication up, but now you can see it's actually happening quite simultaneously. So a lot easier to configure and work with. So that's sort of the basic connection setup, but what if you want to do a bit more, a little bit, fancier work of understanding what the message from cloud is coming to our device as well. So let's head back to Visual Studio and let me go back to my UI and perhaps go to my toolbox and maybe I'll just search for a label text box real quick. There we go. So I'll just bring it up here and maybe I'll just remove the text for ease. And once I've done that, I've just created a little snippet there, and what I can do is I can then go ahead and use one of the existing ones, which basically becomes a listener for my device. And in this case, I'm just saying, hey, whenever you kick off this app, make sure you fill that label or fill that box with all the information that I need. So I'll just quickly paste it up here. Whoops. My device is just doing all sorts of funky things right now. There we go. So once I've done that, and let me just put that in there as well, just resolving all the, there we go, resolved, looks all fine. And now if I go ahead and run it, hopefully, if things go as planned, there we go. So that's my little app over there. And it will start sending information now to my IoT Hub there. But what I can also do is go back to this monitor and I can also send messages. So I can just say, hello world to begin with, keeping it nice and simple. If I want, I can add a timestamp as well to it. And it then starts receiving that information directly through the app. And all of this communication is happening over the Azure IoT Hub. So to actually maybe see if it's actually true or not, we can probably go and look at the usage as well. But at this stage, doesn't look like it's updated much. But effectively, what's happening is I've got my device connected using the Azure IoT Hub SDK, speaking to the Azure IoT Hub, sitting in Azure, and I'm using this simulated tool to basically send messages back from cloud down to the device itself. So what I've done is I've just played with this demo a couple days ago, and to save you the pain of watching me type under pressure, I will just quickly open up one of just the solution, but just implemented earlier so that, yeah, it becomes easier for your eyes as well to look at, which has got a bunch of bits and pieces connected. It's just got a couple more UI elements to it that's a lot more easier to work with. So I'll just wait for it to spin up. There we go. And let's go back and maybe capture or grab come on. It's taking a while. All right. I guess I'll just have to quickly sum this up in a second. There we go. Cool. So while that's spinning up in the background, let's just go ahead and go through a few slides again and then come back and just see what we've sort of just talked about in just the last few slides. So as you can see, we've talked about looking at creating a simple Azure IoT Hub demo using temperature telemetry and then sending that off to Azure IoT Suite, Azure IoT Hub. And what you've got is also the flexibility of creating your own middleware. And based on that, what we've also got is a bunch of SDK and documentation support that allows you to use either Node. So we've got full support for Node, Java, and C# and C at the moment. You've got a whole bunch of operating systems that are supported out of the box. And you also have the flexibility of kind of using the different C libraries that are provided as well with the content. So all this stuff is available as open source projects as well that you can play with. So I guess to summarize what we, yeah, sorry.
I probably won't get this question, but what about Arduino? Is there any Arduino support, or is there any Arduino support?
Yes, so there's Arduino is fully supported. I think there are Python libraries as well that you can use. And you can also use sort of the Node libraries and Python both. So all of them, and there are a bunch of samples that are available on that GitHub link that I've got in there, so you can have a play with them right away as well. So one of the things that we've done is basically ingested data and found out a way of managing devices, so be able to send that bidirectional communication between devices and the cloud and so on. But then if you think about it, right, some of the actions that some of these devices or sensors or these streams of information have to take can be in milliseconds as well. So for example, if you want to detect a fraud transaction, you've only got about 90 milliseconds to detect that stuff. Similarly, there are a few more scenarios around figuring out, how to, react to price changes if a competitor changes their prices. So if you're a retailer of some sort, then you have got about a couple minutes to do that stuff as well. But if you look at them, they are super, super quick information that you have to analyze quickly and then send the information back to create some actionable, get some actionable insights from it. So in this case, what we've got is this stream analytics service in Azure, which allows you to get this hot path of analysis. And we'll build that just right away and see how that whole thing works and connects up together along with Azure IoT Hub. So let's go back and complete the rest of the app that we had. So let me quickly grab a couple of UI elements from here. There we go. Perfect, there we go. And then lastly, I'll just paste them in here. Cool, and there it is. Awesome. So once I've got that stuff there, I can then go ahead and capture my second snippet from here real quick. Just give me a couple seconds so that then we have a fully finished demo to play with. Once I've got that here, so what I'll do is I'll simply go ahead and add a condition that basically checks if there's an alert in the cloud to device message. I can then change my UI to reflect that behavior as well. So if I go back to this simulation app, for example, I just want to be able to check what information am I sending. Whoops, sorry. I think I missed out on doing just a couple of small things. There we go. So it's just easier to just copy and paste code as opposed to writing it all over again. There we go. So what this piece of code is doing here is that if I go back to my XAML.cs, I've got this method which effectively is calling the send to Azure method. And I just need to create one of these properties in here, I guess. I'll just quickly, and hopefully creates that over here on top. And I just need to, doesn't look like it did that. All right, let's just add that over here. So if I scroll down to the bottom, I've just got the send to Azure Boolean that I need to just add over here. So I'll just call it private bool, and there we go. And then I'll just keep it false to begin with. Now what this Boolean is doing is this is just making sure that whenever I want to send continuous telemetry, I've got that either set as true or false, based on which I will start sending messages to my IoT hub from this app itself. So let's go ahead and run that app. And while that is happening, let's start monitoring it as well. So all I've done is just added a couple of custom controls that I can play with. So I've just got that button in there that's sending a bunch of information over to the hub, hopefully. There we go. So it's just got an update. And then I can start sending continuous telemetry as well. So it starts sending information in a sort of real time over to, and it's sending a stream of telemetry as well. So if you can see, every second it's sending a new telemetry piece of information. Now, based on that, what I can also do is send off an alert saying that, hey, there's something going wrong, and I want to send that information back to it. Now, what I've done in this case is I've implemented a UI that then detects what the message is coming in. And it's quite simple right now. It's just detecting an alert, but maybe you can replace that with a function or a trigger of some sort. And I can start sending telemetry that sort of, I can start sending messages to my device that then acts upon whatever is being sent from the cloud. So that's sort of the basic sense of what I've just done. And while we're getting the telemetry up through Azure, what we'll do now is go back to Azure and build that hot path of analysis that I was talking about earlier. There we go. So within Azure itself, you can then go ahead and click on new and create a new stream analytics service within that IoT category. I'll just quickly wait for the menu to load up so that I can show you where it is. There we go. Just within IoT services as well, it's got that stream analytics job in it. Now, what you'll also notice is that there's this Event Hubs service in Azure, but with IoT Hubs, you get Event Hubs already baked into it, so you don't have to create a new endpoint for you to consume a stream of information. So what I'll do now is, instead of creating an Azure Stream Analytics job, I've got one already created, but I haven't done anything with it. So what I'll do is I'll start off by selecting inputs, writing up a query, and then figuring out where I want to send this information off to. So the easiest way for me to is just go ahead and click on inputs. And within inputs, I can add a new input, which will connect to my Azure IoT Hub. In this case, we've actually provided a bunch of data stream options. So I'll just give it a name, call it Live IoT Hub. And once I've got that in there, I've got this option of either selecting data stream or selecting reference data. And I'll show you what reference data means in just a few minutes from now. But for now, let's just go with the data stream because we've got a hot data stream coming directly from Azure IoT Hubs. So I'll go ahead, click on IoT Hub. And it then finds that it's got an IoT Hub directly from my subscription. I can go ahead and select which ones I was looking at. And I think this was the one that we just created recently. So we'll capture that. We'll select what the messaging endpoint was. And once we've done that, I'll just zoom out and then select the format of that information that's coming through. So it can be CSV, it could be JSON, it could be whatever. And then I can go ahead and click on Create. It's just simple as that. And once it's done that, it's got the input configured. Now the next thing for me to do would be to click on Outputs and add a new output. In my case, I'll probably output this out to Power BI. So just to sort of visually see what's happening, so I'll just call it Live Power BI stream, and then I can then select Sync. Now, if you notice, if you actually look closely on it, you've got a few more options here. So you can either select SQL database, you can have a blob storage, event hubs, and so on. And you can also have like a database such as DocumentDB as well, or you can send this off directly to a service bus queue sitting in Azure as well. In my case, I'll just go ahead with Power BI, and then I'll just click on Authorized, which will ask me to log in. And this authorization step didn't work for Phi yesterday, so I hope it works for me today. It's working fine when I did that in my apartment this morning, so hopefully it should work now as well. There we go. quickly sign in. Perfect. Come on. Yep, looks like, yep, there we go. The redirection doesn't work always, but that's fine. So I'll just go ahead and select my workspace. I'll give it a name as well, so I'll call it live temp stream. I'll just give it that name, and then I'll probably copy that and give the table name as well and just add table to it at the end. And once I've done that, it was just quite straightforward on how to implement this stuff. Now I've got an input that's coming from Azure IoT Hubs, and I've got an output that's coming, that's going out to Power BI itself. And what we've done is, with some of the recent announcements that we made, I think a couple months ago, we've added this thing called streaming data sets within Power BI. And with Azure Stream Analytics, you can directly connect to these streaming data that actually updates information in much more real time than what used to be about 6 months ago. So you can actually use the outputs coming out of Stream Analytics directly into Power BI as a streaming set, which gives itself a schema as well, and you can play with it, and you can add your own custom queries and visualize information. So just to complete this whole scenario, what I'll do is I'll quickly, I've got this query, and I think for now we'll just keep it simple and just use that query itself. I'll just update the names to basically be the same as the name of my, oops, the wrong one. Live. So this is just my sync. So as you can see, it's a sort of a light, TSQL schema, so it's quite simple to use. You can also configure some complex workloads with Node as well if you wanted to. So I think we've included JavaScript support as well to add some functions to use with the Azure Stream Analytics service. Just give it a couple more seconds, and now it's done, hopefully. So all I have to do is just start this job, and I'll click on start. And once this streaming service kicks off, I can then go back to my Visual Studio project that I just created. Click on run, because I want to send continuous telemetry that I can then analyze and send off to Power BI. So once I've got that information, I can then basically go ahead and start sending continuous telemetry off to Azure IoT Hubs. And hopefully it comes back and tells me all about it. So there you go. So I've started sending information. Now I'll wait for Power BI to refresh and show me the data set as well that I had just pushed out. It takes a few seconds sometimes just to get the initial response to kick in. But let me just wait for it to refresh real quick. There we go. I've got a bunch of reports in there. There we go. So just give it a few seconds. I just hope the service is started. Yep, it's just still starting. It hasn't started sending information yet. So it takes a couple minutes. So what we'll do is, while it's doing that, I'll probably just quickly switch back to slides for a minute and then talk about a couple of things, and then we can, in the meantime, hope that this Stream Analytics job gets kicked off. So let me just go back to my slides real quick. Oh, no, okay. all right, let's complete this then before moving. There we go. So it's just started off, it's running now, and where is my Power BI dashboard? There we go. So it was quite instantaneous once the service kicked off in Stream Analytics. So I've got that live temperature stream that I just created. I can then go ahead and look at the schema itself. So I can look at the information section. It gives me what the schema of the information is. You can see the temperature is a double, and I've got a date time object in there, and I've got a whole bunch of other information that's added by IoT hubs and event hubs and so on. So I can then go ahead and click on create, reports with this data. I can grab that information and click on, so I can then select any one of this information. So I'll start off with temperature, and I'll start off with time being my x-axis, for example. And then let's use one of these graphs because they're a lot more easier and nicer to look at. And now what I'll do is I'll just quickly pin this. So I'll just have to create a new report, call it temp, live data, create a new report, a new dashboard, and I'll call it live data dashboard. Now what you'll see in this case is, as soon as I pin this, and if I go back to my report, all right, there we go, that's the dashboard there. So hopefully, as we have information flowing through, you'll see all this information updating in real time as well. So let me just edit the tile to display the refresh rate as well, because I've got information coming through every few seconds. So we'll just wait for it to start sending some data and see if there are any changes. There we go. So as you can see, I think the graph just updated a little bit. So what's happening right now is, using IoT Hub, we are streaming information in real time from the device through a universal Windows 10 app, sending off to Azure IoT Hub, which has an Event Hub endpoint that then connects to Azure Stream Analytics to do some quick analysis. At the moment, I'm just syncing all the information, but you can make some complex queries as well, which I'll just show you in a minute. And once we've got that, we are then sending this information directly to Power BI, which has got this dashboard that you can then use to sort of communicate with and add data to. Cool, so that part is done. Now what I'll do is I'll quickly go and show you. Let me open up. So what you can do in some cases is, when you want to do some analysis based on some reference data, you can actually create a CSV file, for example, or a JSON file as well. But in the past, for example, working with one of the customers, we worked using the CSV file, and that CSV file basically had a bunch of conditions in it. And I'll just wait for it to quickly load up. Where is it? All right, so let's just start off from here. And in here, if you look back at the solution itself, I had a bunch of rules that I had set up already as part of it. Now within those rules, if you look at the query, what you will notice is that it's using reference data, and it's then creating a join between it. So on the input side, if I just zoom in, it's got this little blob object which has all the reference data in it. And then the second one is the IoT Hub telemetry that I had connected earlier as well. So if we zoom out of it, we'll then see that actually they're creating a join over here, which then basically captures information and checks if it's matching the required conditions as per my CSV file that I have in my blob store account. And what that CSV file looks like is over here as well. So if I just go back to my storage account, what you can do is you can set up a schema which checks sort of the date and time sequence, and then figures out what's the latest file to capture for the rules and definition for that specific alert within Stream Analytics. So if we just give it a couple seconds to load. I don't know why my machine is so slow. Not responding. I guess it's too early for my computer as well. Come on. Let's give it a second try and see if it loads up. Come on. Anyway, I guess what I was trying to show you was that it's actually a real thing that's sitting in Blob Store, and it's got a CSV file attached to it, which effectively has a set of a set of sort of alerts that I've already set up within the file itself, which basically checks if the temperature is more than X amount, create an alert of that type, and then it will go ahead and reference that information in Stream Analytics, which will then go back to my logic apps and create alerts for me. So that's all I wanted to show it in here. So device rules. Anyway, I think it's taking way too long to load up, so let's just go back a step a little bit and switch over to slides real quick. So what we saw just now, to summarize, is Stream Analytics connecting up to Power BI and allowing you to create these custom SQL queries that help you then push data and do some hot analysis. And one of my last demos that I've got at the end also uses this concept called window functions. Now, this window function is basically a way of saying, actually, instead of streaming all the data in near real time, I want to be able to create this, window that then helps me aggregate data in a much better sense. So, for example, we've got this concept of tumbling windows that allows you to send information, every X number of seconds. And the key here is that none of these events will overlap between two windows. Similarly, you've got this option of, creating hopping windows, which basically, hops from one window to the other. If you want the hopping window to act like a tumbling window, all you'll have to do is just make the hop the same size as the window size, and that's all there is to that. And then lastly, we have a sliding window, which only gets triggered based upon events entering into Stream Analytics itself. So these are sort of the three window options that we've got within Stream Analytics, and I'll show you a bit of that in my last demo as I go through it. What we've also done is we've also implemented a bunch of functionality within Visual Studio as well. I prefer using Azure most of the times, so I do everything in there, but if you prefer Visual Studio, you could actually do everything within Visual Studio as well, right from configuring the query, like the one at the bottom there, to actually seeing the stream of information that's coming to your Stream Analytics job as well. And we've just seen the Power BI part of it as well, so I'll just quickly run through those slides. And the stuff that I was talking about earlier is how you can have, Power BI that I showed you was just the classic Power BI example. But in my first demo, I had the Power BI embedded demo as well. So you could actually either use Power BI for all of your, information and analysis, or you could actually embed them to your dashboards as well if you wanted to. Now, once we've done that, the last piece in this puzzle sort of becomes logic apps, so to say. Now, what we've done with logic apps is basically give you these extensions or these integration endpoints that you can then have a nice workflow that helps you go from X to Y or X to Z, and then have a bunch of things in between that are actually configuring systems within your internal corporates, or if it's actually creating some tasks like sending an email or sending a text message notification based on some alerts. So if I talk that back to my temperature demo, I can have a logic app then talks to my Stream Analytics, and based on any alert that's created, I can then send it off to logic apps, which will then use Twilio or SendGrid or something else to flick a message to my email account as well as to my phone as well. So I get that information readily available for me. So to show that functionality, I thought to do a quick, poll and see how far we go. So before I go into that part, let me just show you what I've got configured here so that it becomes a lot more easier to understand. So I've got this logic app in here, which is effectively going on Twitter and checking for something. I'll just tell you in a second what that actually is. But I've got that enabled, and I've got this logic app designer that is effectively designing, that allows me to sort of create this workflow in a nice sort of GUI format. If I want, I can also use JSON format as well to configure it. But once I've got that information, I just check for a couple conditions and then start a workflow, which then kicks off something over here, which is effectively checking and sending information through SendGrid to my email account, which I can then consume and have a look at. So to do that, let's switch back to Power BI real quick. It's taking a few seconds. I think my whole machine is getting a bit slower now. Yep, not responding. There we go, favorites. There we go, so let me open that up here. Perfect. So I've got that up and running. Now what I'll do is I'll just quickly go back to slides. So what I thought would be interesting is to do a poll. And for that poll, I thought, okay, maybe we should go for red and blue and just see how many people in this room like red or blue or whatever. But I thought what might be a bit interesting is if we scrap that out and look for tabs and spaces and find the people that we might want to slowly, politely kick out of the room. No, I'm just kidding. We can look through and do that. So to do that, I think we would need a bit of participation as well from everyone in the audience. All you have to do is go on Twitter, tweet with hashtag MSAUignite, and then choose your preference of tabs. So type in tabs or type in spaces. And then I'll show you the workflow around it, and then we'll start judging a few people in the room. No, we won't do that. So let's get back, and let me try and see if I can kick that off as well. Let's go back and see if I've got my tweet ready to go. There we go. So let's tweet. So there we go. So I'm just basically typing tabs because, of course, I mean, space is not even an option. Let's just go with tabs. In my case, I've just tweeted that, and then I can go ahead and click on overview, and it will hopefully detect what's coming through. I'm just waiting to see what's showing up here. So it looks like it's just triggered a few events, so people have started, giving their responses in. And if I go back to my Logic Apps Designer, and I know it's not looking fancy at all because the computer has just gone super slow, but what I'm doing now is once I capture that stuff from Twitter, after every 3 seconds, I send that information off to this Azure function, which basically grabs the location, the name of the user, and the text behind it. And then I've got a couple of conditions in there, which then sends, based on a couple of conditions, sends out an email off to my email account that I can then use. Now to show you what's happening in that Azure function, I'll bring that up real quickly as well. Within that Azure function, I'm just detecting what people's preferences are, and then I'm sending that information off to an event hub, which then talks to Stream Analytics, which then creates a bunch of tasks. Now, one thing that I like about event hubs is, Azure Functions is that you can actually create a bunch of triggers as well. So while you are all tweeting, I can go back and have a look at my dashboard and see what people prefer. All right, yep, Power BI is not responding. Let's go back here. All right, come on. I think too many live demos are also not a good thing. Wow. Come on. So let's try it once more, and hopefully all of the responses have been collected, which I know have been collected. And within my Azure function over here as well, I've just got my logs here that I can have a look at. And as you can see, there were a bunch of tweets that it started capturing, a bunch of them that are coming through, and I can't really see. No. All right, hopefully. All right. Come on. I think it's just gone quite slow. There we go. Awesome. All right. That's good. Okay. I was just a bit tensed. So what we've got, oh wow, okay, it's pretty equal. Interesting. So people like spaces in the room? All right, awesome. Good stuff. I prefer tabs. But anyway, what I did was I knew some people would also type in, tabs and spaces, and for them I had a rule in there which effectively flicked me a mail somewhere here. Let me just do a refresh and see if anyone's actually done that. I was just testing. There we go. So someone with a hashtag something that I won't call out has just written both tabs and spaces, and I've captured that, and I can then see and then respond back and say, hey, please see if you want to just use a single way of using stuff, not both tabs and spaces, and I can then configure that stuff easily and send that feedback back to that person itself. So let's switch back to the slides, and thanks for completing this one. And I don't know if you're fans of Silicon Valley, but I could be one of them as well. And of course. Anyway, so all the resources, as I said before, are up there. And just to summarize it real quickly, I think we've only got about 5-10 minutes for questions and stuff. To summarize quickly, what we've done is we've done a whole bunch of stuff, a bunch of moving parts, level 300 session for that. So what we did was we started off with basically nothing, looked at some of the conceptual overview of what Azure IoT Suite is all about and how can you make the most of it. We then created a Windows 10 app that can be deployed to any Windows 10 machine. And it's got an open source SDK as well that I can connect to. I use a universal Windows app for that, which then talks to my IoT Hub, which can then also receive messages from IoT Hub to action upon. And once I've done that whole management and ingestion part of it, I then move on to doing some storing of that information or hot analysis of that information, which is done through Stream Analytics. And once I do that, I then push it over to Power BI, which allows me to visualize everything. And then we can use Logic Apps to find out what people prefer, and then play with a couple of memes in there as well. So that's sort of the end-to-end story around how this whole suite works all together. And again, if you want to get started, I've got a couple of kits to give away here. So if you've got questions, you might be the lucky ones to get them. But apart from that, there are a bunch of them that you can actually buy off the shelf. It's got everything pre-installed. So if you're looking for Arduino development, you can use that, and it's got samples already installed in it, and so on. So a whole bunch of them. These are just about a handful of them, but a lot of them are available. So one of my favorite ones is, for example, this Grove Pi kit, which has got about, I think, 10 or 12 sensors, fully pluggable with, either, I think, Raspbian or Noobs or Windows 10 IoT Core. It's got a C# SDK, it's got a Node SDK as well that you can play with and connect with. So it's quite handy. So I think that's sort of the overall summary of what I had to talk about. So what I'll do is, quickly. So any questions for anyone? Yeah.
With the device twin that you had up there,
Yes.
was that acting like a proxy capturing the data going back to the cores, or is that actually the data directly from the Azure?
So it's directly talking to Azure. It's not talking to my device at all. So that proxy little applet that I had was directly talking to Azure IoT Hub. It didn't care what was on the screen itself. Yeah. So there you go. You got a Raspberry Pi? Yeah. Yes. Yes. So not in Power BI embedded as of now, but that functionality is coming very, very soon. Yes. So again, a similar process. So there are multiple ways of doing it. If you remember from Scott Goo's demo at the keynote, you could do everything in Logic Apps itself. But if you wanted to customize the query a little bit, like I did for my Stream Analytics, I'll just start off by capturing the telemetry using IoT Hub. Or if you don't want to manage devices, you can just use Event Hubs as well. And then from Event Hubs, you can then push it to Stream Analytics, and then finally push it off directly to Power BI. Now, what is interesting is with Power BI, you don't have to create that connection. It gives you that in the GUI itself. Right. All right, so you're talking about adding extra functionality within the app. So With Azure IoT Hub, what you can also do is push out files as well. So you can either upload files or you could push out functions or call functions with some embedded information within it as well. So for example, you might have programmed or created your device in a way which can actually add code to it as well, depending on what information you're sending from cloud to device. So in that case, you just send it maybe a JSON format that it can then capture that information and create code out of it within your app that's running on your device, and then you can do it that way as well. I've heard about a couple of scenarios doing that, but it all comes down to the way you configure your device as well. No, no, no. So all of that stuff will get updated on the fly. There's a question on the back. Yeah. So the pricing structure is up on the pricing website as well. I don't remember off the top of my head, but all of them come with a free tier as well for you to try out. If I remember correctly, one of the things that I built or that I was using a while ago, I think about 6 to 8 months ago, we had about, I think, that sample was running about 100 devices, so to say, and it was doing a whole bunch of stuff, including predictive monitoring and a machine learning and the whole lot and stuff, and it only costed about, I think, $120 for about 150 to 200 devices, which is sort of decent size given the amount of work it was doing. But again, all the stuff is available on pricing. So if you just go to ash.com, and then there's a pricing tab, and you can click on that and calculate stuff easily.
So this all sounds very exciting for everybody to actually start with the sensor, gather some information on it and stuff. But a lot of us in this room probably has a issue with we want to replicate this into a very into an existing legacy environment where you've got a lot of embedded,
Yep.
And the ability to actually both talk to old PLCs for the type that you've
Mm-hmm.
got, which obviously would require too.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any examples of where you've had a customer with GPU attached to them managed to actually implement this
Mm-hmm.
into a existing bed of legacy?
Yep.
Where they need to actually monitor all these systems, they might have existing PLCs or whatever out there, and the economies of actually being able to do that.
Yep. So the question there was being able to use legacy devices with this whole Azure IoT suite. So what we've done is we've got this concept or this SDK called Azure IoT Gateway. With that, you can configure your own gateway, maybe put not a Raspberry Pi, but an industry-ready device. And based on that, you can then create that gateway in a way that can talk to those embedded devices in whatever protocols and languages that they talk with. And then you can use that gateway device using the Gateway SDK to connect to Azure IoT Hub, which will then manage all those embedded devices for you through that gateway. So does that sort of make sense? So you can grab a IoT kit after this as well. Cool.
What are the performance implications of having multiple kind of functions within a single screen? Does it kind of repeat the kind of inputs across individual screens, or does it actually tell a processing, or how does that work?
Right. So the question there was, when we are doing stream analysis, is it doing in parallel or is it doing in sort of sequential format?
But you may want, say, multiple different time series, so you have the different windows that you have available across different functions, or is it the same kind of input source? So, are there any performance implications of that?
So performance implications, so all of these services that I showed you already sort of auto-scale, and their pricing model is not based on the amount of processing power it needs. The pricing is based on the number of messages it's ingesting and processing and stuff. So you wouldn't have to care about scale because all of that stuff is handled for you in the background. Yep.
Taking a legacy question for them. Is there any aspects of the architecture that there's a security concern to this? Like
Yes.
having this chemical facility, something like that.
Yep.
And, who's the process engineer? You don't want anything connected to the internet
Yeah, absolutely.
anywhere near this stuff.
So there is a very interesting, we can talk about security after the session as well if you prefer, but what I've done is there is this document here. There's a link on my GitHub page which has got this link to this Azure blog post that talks about all the security implications. But effectively, I think there's one picture that sort of summarizes the whole process, and which is this one here. Let me see if I can zoom in. So that one basically talks about how you've got this concept of, so effectively what's happening is everything that's happening over IoT hubs is either over X.506 or TLS-based or handshake and encryption. So effectively you can encrypt that using the stuff that we've provided to you, or you could sort of implement your own protocols, as I said earlier. And with the introduction of TPM with Windows 10 IoT Core, I see this stuff becoming a lot more easier to work with. But in terms of architectural guidance, this is the blog post to have a look at. And if there are any questions, just flick me a email as well. Yes, yes. Yep, there's a question at the back.
I'm just thinking about a use case where, vending machine
Yep.
actually on the back then sends the data. So do we need to use like data stream analytics or cognitive services to do that?
So stream analytics is a way of analyzing information, and you can have cognitive services sitting, before it that can then find. So cognitive services is designed to sort of figure out stuff that's happening with a picture, or if it's so depending on what API you're talking about, if it's computer vision, if it's natural processing language and stuff. Right. Yep. So you could use cognitive service to detect that stuff, and then to create jobs for it, you could use stream analytics, which then detects how many items are missing, and then you can create a job after that as well. So cognitive service can detect what's the quantity and stuff like, which I'm not sure how good it will be at that. But there's another thing called, I'll probably overload you with a lot of information, but there's this thing called the cognitive toolkit that we've got within our Azure Intelligence branch that you can have a look at. It's an open source neural net framework that you can install on any GPU processor, and you can train your own model out of it as well. So we can talk about that later on after the session as well. Yep.
The messages coming back down. If that connection's cut, if the internet goes down, you have to kind of handle that yourself in your own code.
No.
Or is it automatically?
That's automatically handled for you. So when I talked about the device twin concept, where you have the desired state and the actual state, the device, whenever it communicates and talks over the internet, it's got the actual state configured and sends that information back to IoT Hub. But that desired state will only update once the device becomes live or comes live to the internet. At the same time, when you're sending telemetry off, all that information will stick in your code, and then it'll just go off once the connection becomes available as well. But on the device side, yep, you might have to do some tweaks, but everything else from handling between the cloud and the device will be handled by the Azureized SDK. Yep.
Are there any plans to allow you to route device to cloud messages to outside of Azure services?
Yep. So there is this concept called routing. I don't want to overload with IoT Hub, but there is this thing in Azure IoT Hub itself, which is called routing. Let me see if I can quickly bring it up so that I can show you what I am talking about. I think, hang on. Let me see if I can quickly bring it up. Here we go. So I think we just announced this feature about 3 or 4 months ago. And so there you go. So what you do is you configure your endpoints, and that endpoint could be a queue, could be a, I don't know, some other storage stuff, whatever it is. Right. Right. So, and maybe, so there are multiple ways of doing it as well, but one of the ways that I can think of right now is, so are you thinking about doing a push or a pull or doing a poll? Right. So if you've got a WebSocket, you can then use something like Logic Apps that can then route the message out of Azure as well for you, and you can just have a standard HTTP endpoint WebSocket that's connecting to it. I think.
Got two quick ones. One, with Windows IoT Core, Gen IoT Core, what kind of applications can you install on it? Pretty much anything that you can install on Windows?
Yes. Not pretty much everything. There are some limitations as well, but we can talk about that after this as well. I think we're just running out of time. Just last question.
Yeah, just quickly on Logic Apps performance over web docs and functions.
Yes.
When would you go for Logic Apps versus, say, functions?
I would use functions when it's a small code applet that I want to build, because it's something that's not available out of the box. For Logic Apps, I'll go when it's just connecting with a bunch of systems and existing services and SaaS apps and stuff. That's when this stuff makes a lot more sense. So functions only for when you have to write actual code that's not implementable as an app that's already there in Logic Apps. But apart from that, you can do everything else. So thanks again for coming along, and sorry for the next session that we took a bit time on.